It is time for my 2022 NFL mock draft. What's going on, guys? I'm back with another Chicago Bears off-season video. If you guys want more of these videos covering the Bears, definitely be sure to subscribe to my channel. I cover pretty much everything regarding the Bears. And today, I'll be making a mock draft for this upcoming draft, which as of the time I'm recording this, the draft is in exactly 2 weeks, guys. Round 1 starts in 2 weeks. We're going to be picking in round 2 and beyond, most likely, because we don't have a first round pick unless we trade up into the first round, which I probably can't see happening, guys, because we have too many needs on this team. We don't have enough draft capital to trade up, so probably doesn't make too much sense to trade up into the first round. So probably going to be starting picking day 2, which is going to be next Friday. And I'll be giving you guys like what picks I think the Bears are going to make. And before I begin, I want to talk about which needs the Bears have on this team. And guys, we have needs all over the team, okay? We're not going to fix every single thing on this team in one draft, in one offseason, because we don't have the resources to do so. So unfortunately, we have to, focus on our top needs, our biggest needs. And right now, I would say the biggest needs on our team are wide receiver, offensive line, and cornerback, okay? In those 3 spots, we badly could use more help there, especially with our early round picks in rounds 2 and rounds 3. And the last thing I'll say before getting into the mock draft is that it's virtually impossible to predict where these players are going to go in the draft, especially after round 1, guys. It's pretty much a crapshoot, so I tried to keep this as realistic as possible, looking at other people's mock drafts, looking at the rankings online, and seeing where these players are projected to go, and that's kind of what I based my mock draft on. Obviously anything can happen in the mock draft. People can fall, like Justin Fields somehow fell from being viewed as like the number 2 overall pick all the way down to number 11, where we traded up to get him. So anything is possible, anything can happen in the draft, but let's get into it. With the 39th pick in the 2022 NFL draft, the Chicago Bears select George Pickens, wide receiver out of Georgia. George Pickens is a dog, guys. I'm not just saying that because he was a Georgia Bulldog. I'm saying that because this play is the literal physical embodiment of a dog mentality, okay? Fast, physical, and ferocious. George Pickens honestly could be a first round pick, guys. I would not be surprised if he did go in the first round because he's that level of talent, that level of athlete. But the reason why I think he might fall to the second round, the reason why he's falling to the second round in many mock drafts is because he suffered an injury in the spring of 2021. Okay, tore his ACL, missed a good portion of the 2021 college football season, which is why he wasn't able to really break out in the way that a lot of people expected him to break out based on his phenomenal rookie season, freshman season at Georgia, and a pretty, I would say mediocre sophomore season. He also missed some games in 2020 as well, in that COVID season. But 2021, a lot of people expected him to, really break out on the stage at Georgia, but unfortunately he tore his ACL, which is why I wasn't able to show much in 2021. But he came back from that injury really, really fast. So he recovered from the ACL injury in only 8 months. He was there down the stretch for Georgia, helped them win the national championship as well, obviously. So that ACL right now, it doesn't seem like it's that big of a concern anymore for teams because he's already played on it and he was pretty fine. I'm sure teams are doing their medical tests as well to really see where it's at. But I think the health should not be as big of a concern. But if he's available in the second round, yes, I want the Chicago Bears badly to take this guy because he's exactly the type of receiver that Justin Fields needs in this offense as his number 1. Okay, if you look at his measurables, George Pickens is a freak of nature. 6'3", weighs 200 pounds. He ran a 4.47 40-yard dash, so really fast, really tall, good height. If you look at his RAS, which is the relative athletic score, which really combines, all the athletic tests that you gave at the combine, he's one of the best athletes, in the entire draft class available this year. So from a pure athletic perspective, yes, he has what it takes to be a number 1 receiver. But if you look at the tape, it looks a lot better on there, which is what I really care about when evaluating these guys. First of all, he has elite ball tracking skills. Okay, when the ball's in the air, he's able to hunt it down and come down with a catch. If it's a deep pass, if it's a medium pass, if it's a short route, he's been able to come down with some insane catches because of his ability to track the ball in the air. Okay, and that's something that I feel like it's overlooked in receivers, right? You just expect them to look up and find the ball, but some receivers do it much better than others, and George Pickens is one of those receivers. His hand-eye coordination is fantastic. He attacks the ball in the air. He can high point the ball. He can jump up and contort his body to make circus catches. He's not afraid to get physical either, guys. I mean, I talked about his dog mentality. That is what George Pickens is. A very, very physical, competitive receiver. If you look on his tape, he is shoving guys to the ground, fighting with his hands during the route while trying to beat press. He's jumping over people. Like, he annoys the hell out of a lot of his opposition, which sometimes can be a little bit too much. Sometimes he's probably trying to do a little bit too much, which might result in penalties in the NFL. So that has to be cleaned up, obviously. But I think that, you know, that mentality, that love for football, that aggressiveness is also very useful as well, guys. I mean, last year we didn't have like a single receiver that was this mean, that was this aggressive. And from a run blocking perspective, like, we haven't had a run blocking receiver this good probably since Brandon Marshall. Okay, I know run blocking isn't like a big thing in receivers, but you prefer, you know, a receiver that can block to a receiver that can't block, all things similar. And George Pickens is one that can block really, really well, guys. I mean, he actually is a willing blocker, which in receivers nowadays, that is not, you know, a very common trait at all. So very aggressive, very physical, has that, you know, length, that speed to be a number one in this league. He's also a twitchy athlete, guys. So after, you know, after the catch, he's made defenders miss on occasion, juking, spinning, putting the moves on them. He can do that for us. And overall, I feel like the value is way too good with George Pickens here in the second round to pass up on him. So hopefully he's available. I'm also going to read you guys the stats real quick before I move on to the next pick. So like I mentioned, 2019, his freshman year, he had a fantastic season, 727 receiving yards, 8 touchdowns, really, really good year. Following year, had a couple injuries, 513 receiving yards, 6 touchdowns. And then after that, he obviously tore his ACL, which is why his 2021 season, he wasn't able to show much at all. But if he is available at pick 39, I would absolutely love to take him. At pick number 48, we have a trade. The Chicago Bears trade back with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They acquire pick number 60 and pick number 91 in exchange for pick number 48. And the reason for this, guys, is because I feel like Ryan Poles has talked a lot about already how he wants to acquire more draft picks, how he, you know, thinks that draft picks are pretty much lottery picks, and the more you have, the better. And it would make total sense for the Bears to try to acquire an extra third rounder if they can. And, you know, for the Bucs here, they would probably want more high-end talent since Tom Brady is probably in his last year, maybe second to last year. So you need a guy that can start right away. So they probably aren't going to value that extra third rounder as much as the Bears would. So that's why I have the Chicago Bears making this trade. With the 60th pick in the 2022 NFL Draft, the Chicago Bears select Tyler Smith, offensive lineman from Tulsa. Now, he played left tackle at Tulsa, so he might be a tackle in the NFL. Maybe a guard, though, at first, because he is very raw. But, man, this is a polarizing prospect. Because on one hand, he is one of the most violent players in the NFL Draft, if not the most violent out of all these guys. Okay, he lives and breathes football. He wants to completely, you know, overwhelm and destroy his opposition. But on the other hand, he is really raw and very young as well. So he's going to have to be developed. Our new offensive line coach, Chris Morgan, he's going to have to do some great work with this guy. But if he's actually developed properly, he could be one of the meanest offensive linemen in the NFL. So I'll start by talking about his measurements. So he's 6'5", weighs 324 pounds. If you look at his athletic tests, he performed really well on pretty much all the tests. Okay, his 40-yard dash time was 5.02, which for a guy that big, that is really, really impressive. And it shows up on the tape as well. He can move to the second level. He can move laterally. He can keep up with some of the faster, you know, rushers in college football, probably in the NFL as well, because he tested that well. And for his zone blocking run scheme like Luke Getsy is going to run here in Chicago, he would be the perfect fit. Okay, so he'd be a big benefit athletically on the Chicago Bears offensive line. But perhaps his biggest, you know, attribute, the reason why we would take him this high, is his raw physical power and the violence that he plays with. Like I mentioned earlier, okay, there's very few guys on tape that you look at that just completely want to destroy their opposition, that have this much hate for the people on the opposite side of the football field. He has an angry style of play, okay, finishes blocks, goes on mean streaks, just knocking people down, you know, using his hands violently at the line of scrimmage. That's the type of offensive lineman that Tyler Smith is. He also stands up for his quarterback. There are a number of times where, you know, if there was a hit or something, he would get up in the, you know, in the face of the opposing defensive lineman. Now, the thing about this, though, is that there's a downside too, because sometimes he plays too out of control. He has way too many penalties. In college, he had 16 holding penalties, which is way too much. So this is part of the reason why he's even going to be available to us in the, you know, late second round, because he is very raw as a prospect. He's only 21 years old. He has to refine his hand techniques, his lower body techniques too. He has to create more leverage to be more, consistent in the NFL. But as a prospect, man, he's probably one of the most talented ones available in the second round. If you look at his stats, in 2020, he allowed 0 sacks, 8 pressures in 9 games. In 2021, he allowed 2 sacks, 9 pressures in 14 games. So pretty phenomenal numbers. Obviously not the best of the best competition, but man, I'll be really, really excited to add this guy to our offensive line. With the 71st pick in the 2022 NFL Draft, the Chicago Bears select Alec Pierce, wide receiver out of Cincinnati. The Bears need more wide receivers, guys. I know I already took one, with their first pick, so people will be like, oh, why are you taking another one? Don't we need cornerback? Don't we need other, stuff on our team? Yes, we do, but wide receiver is one of the biggest, most important positions in the NFL, and right now the Bears don't have a good receiving core whatsoever. It's only Mooney and Pringle at this point in time, which isn't good enough. And I know adding George Pickens would help, but I would like to get another one pretty early. And Alec Pierce, a local product. Okay, he actually went to high school in the Chicago suburbs at Glenbard West, but he would be the perfect fit in the Chicago Bears offense and a great weapon for Justin Fields. From an athletic perspective, again, this is one of the best athletes in the entire class. I know I'm taking a lot of big athletes, and that's because Matt Eberflus, Ryan Poles stressed the need for athletes on this team. One of Justin Fields' best abilities as a quarterback is his ability to pass the ball down the field. And last year, we didn't have enough guys that could get open with consistency. We had, some fast guys, but we didn't have necessarily big, strong guys and guys that can create, separation on their routes. But Alec Pierce is one of those guys that actually can. Okay, so I'll read you guys his measurables first. So he's 6'3", weighs 213 pounds, so definitely a big, tall receiver. If you look at his RAS, his relative athletic score, it's one of the best in the class. Ran a 4.41 40-yard dash, so really fast. Fast 20-yard split, 10-yard split as well. If you look at his length, obviously one of the biggest athletes in this, in this combine. So from a combine perspective, really, really good numbers all around. But let's look at his tape and what he actually did in the games, and that was also really fantastic. I'll read you guys his stats first of all during his career at Cincinnati. Freshman year, didn't really play. 2019, he had 652 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns. 2020, the COVID season, he had 313 receiving yards and 3 touchdowns. And then last year in 2021 was really his breakout season. Okay, 884 receiving yards on 52 receptions and 8 touchdowns. Okay, he was a monster in the red zone, and that's what he can be for the Chicago Bears as well. Okay, potential monster in the red zone. If you look at his frame, he has the length, he has the speed to go up against NFL level cornerbacks and dominate against them, okay, to beat them in the red zone. He already did that multiple times in college, and I think he can do that on the NFL level as well. He has a rangy, catching frame. Obviously, such long arms, so he can contort his body and make these fantastic circus catches in the corner of the end zone. He can high point the ball. He can extend his body for the catch. He had a number of jumping catches where he had to, obviously jump and dive for the ball, which is something he did really well there at Cincinnati because of his explosive jumping ability. And overall, his hands are just so reliable. Okay, when Cincinnati needed a big play to be made, Alec Pierce made that play for Cincinnati. Not just in the red zone, guys, but also going down the field as well. He could be a deep threat in the NFL because of his speed and his ability to win matchups on the outside. He can beat press because of the physicality that he plays with. He's also very versatile as well. He can play in the slot or on the outside. He played both on the slot and on the outside in college. He could probably do that in the NFL as well. Probably an above average route runner, not like an elite route runner or anything. He can definitely refine his technique on certain routes, but there's just so much he's good at doing on tape, which makes me surprised that he's, actually falling to the 3rd round in so many mock drafts that I'm seeing. He might be going a little bit higher. We might have to take him in the 2nd round if we really want him, but I'm telling you, man, as a piece in Luke Getsy's offense, he could be so extremely dangerous, especially with a quarterback like Justin Fields. With the 91st pick in the 2022 NFL Draft, the Chicago Bears select Dylan Parham, offensive lineman from Memphis. Yes, I'm going towards the offense again. I know some people might be a little bit put off by that I'm only drafting offense early, but that's what we need to do, guys, in my opinion, if we want to make this offense a lot better, because right now we don't have a lot of good players on the offensive side of the football. Yes, I know the defense needs work too, but I would much rather use our resources this year to build around Justin Fields and see exactly what type of quarterback he can be, so we at least know the answer to that big question. And we're not going to know the answer if we keep on surrounding him with garbage. So investing a pick in a guy like Dylan Parham, I think that'll be a fantastic investment, in front of Justin Fields. So he's probably going to play guard in the NFL. He played guard during his time at Memphis, played some tackle too. Very rarely though, only a couple games I believe. So is going to be a guard in the NFL, maybe a center, maybe a guard. And in contrast to Tyler Smith, who I selected earlier, Dylan Parham is a much more refined product. Okay, he started 4 years at Memphis, has a lot of experience, well seasoned, has good technique. He's already blocked for some NFL level running backs and Darrell Henderson, Tony Pollard, Kenneth Gainwell as well. So he could be a plug and play starter for the Chicago Bears at guard, maybe at center in case Lucas Patrick doesn't work out, or if we have injuries. Like, I think this could be a solid interior offensive line piece, and he fits the zone blocking scheme really, really well too, guys. I mean, he's one of the most athletic offensive linemen in this class, which, yes, I'm sticking with the theme of selecting athletic players because that's what Matt Eberflus and Ryan Poles have said they want. He's 6'3", weighs 311 pounds. He actually bulked up a little bit from his last snap in college, which is good because he was viewed as an undersized player. He still is kind of undersized for the NFL, but I think that bulk up is definitely going to help him. And from an athletic perspective, again, like I mentioned, he's one of the best athletes in this class, okay? Fantastic 40-yard dash time, 4.93. Great numbers all around the other tests as well. And if you look at the tape, man, he can really move. His mobility and his core strength are probably his best attributes. He played in the RPO, spread type of scheme where there was a lot of moving going on, and he was moving, really well with all the other players, okay, with some of the, even faster interior defensive linemen in college football. So I think the fit will be perfect. As an athlete, he fits the scheme really well. The only question is he a little bit too undersized? Okay, our last interior offensive lineman, our last center, Sam Mustipher, he was undersized and it hurt him a big deal. But I think that Dylan Parham is a much stronger, much more refined athlete, much more refined product than Mustipher was. And that's why I think he's going to have success if he's drafted by the Chicago Bears. With the 148th pick in the 2022 NFL Draft, the Chicago Bears select Tariq Castro-Fields, cornerback out of Penn State. And yes, I finally selected a defensive player. I had to select one at some point, and here in the 5th round, I thought that the value with Tariq Castro-Fields was too good to pass up. Okay, the Chicago Bears need more cornerbacks. Obviously, we're probably going to get another one in free agency. Right now, we don't have the most depth. We don't have the most talent, but we do have, what I would say, maybe an okay starting 3 if everybody is healthy, if everybody lives up to their potential in Jalen Johnson, Thomas Graham Jr., and Tavon Young. But we could definitely use some competition for that second starting outside role opposite of Jalen Johnson. Okay, between Thomas Graham Jr. and Tariq Castro-Fields, we could probably see a pretty nice competition in camp. And I think Castro-Fields definitely has the potential to be a starting level cornerback in the NFL. He's 6 foot tall, weighs 194 pounds, tested great on the athletic test as well. Okay, ran a 4.38 40-yard dash, so one of the fastest cornerbacks in this year's class. And you're going to need that speed in today's NFL, going up against some of the faster receivers that you have to go up against. So from an athletic, physical standpoint, he could be, a solid starter in this league. But if you look at his tape, there's a lot to like on there as well. There's a lot of inconsistency though. That's why he would be falling to the 5th round. But if he's coached up properly by a great defensive coach in Matt Eberflus, maybe he could turn into something more. Okay, if you look at his tape at Penn State, he started 4 years there, so has a lot of experience playing there, more knowledge of techniques, of coverages than probably most cornerbacks coming out do. So he could be, maybe an instant starter if he does win the battle in camp. And his aggressiveness is probably the best attribute about him. Okay, he had 10 tackles behind the line of scrimmage, so ball hawking, he was pretty good as well. Had 25 passes defended, only 3 interceptions though, so he wasn't able to turn that ball hawking into interceptions just yet. So hopefully he can improve on that in the NFL. But overall, his abilities to play in zone are fairly decent in the cover 2 scheme like Eberflus might run. I think it would work pretty well here. And as a prospect available in the 5th round, I think the value is too good for the Chicago Bears to pass up. With the 150th pick in the 2022 NFL Draft, the Chicago Bears select Smoke Monday, safety out of Auburn. First of all, what a fantastic name. I mean, Smoke Monday is one hell of a name, probably the most unique name I've seen in this entire draft class. I promise I didn't just pick him because of his name, because he is a really good player, in my opinion as well, at least as a prospect. And the Bears could use more depth at safety, more competition at safety. Right now on the opposite side of Eddie Jackson, we don't really know who's starting at this point. It could be DHC, it could be the new guy we got from the Tennessee Titans, Crookshank. Or it could be this guy, Smoke Monday, if he's drafted by the Bears. And what Smoke Monday would bring to the Chicago Bears is the hard-hitting, physical type of attitude and play that the Bears really need on the defensive side of the football. He's 6'3", weighs 198 pounds, so definitely one of the biggest defensive backs available in this year's class. So that length is definitely going to be helpful on the Chicago Bears defense. And if you look at his 40-yard dash, 4.52, so decent level speed. And the tape was really exciting as well. Okay, he laid a number of big hits on the opposing receivers. I mean, his name is Smoke Monday. He brings the smoke every single time he's on the football field. And yeah, I think that's something the Bears could definitely use. That power, that strength, and that willingness to want to crush your opposition. He was also a very secure tackler, though. I know sometimes a lot of these big hitters don't exactly wrap up and tackle the guy, but for the majority of the games that he played, he was a pretty strong tackler. Okay, good solid fundamentals, very few missed tackles. If you look at his stats overall, so during his time at Penn State, he was a 4-year player there. He had 171 total tackles, 17 tackles for loss, 6 sacks, 5 interceptions, 3 touchdowns, 3 defensive touchdowns. That's pretty nice. 8 passes defended, 1 forced fumble as well. So fairly productive there at Penn State, and I think this would be a solid pick for the Chicago Bears. He would mainly be a box safety, probably a strong safety in the NFL, but as a backup, maybe as a potential starter next to Eddie Jackson if he wins the battle in camp, this could be a pretty solid pick. And finally, with the 186th pick in the 2022 NFL Draft, the Chicago Bears select Jeffrey Gunter, edge rusher, out of Coastal Carolina. Now, this would be a developmental type of pick. I don't think he would be starting right away, but that's what the majority of 6th-round picks are, guys. They're not going to start for you right away. They're mainly developmental guys that hopefully turn into something down the road. Probably will be special teams players early on, though, and that's what Jeffrey Gunter is, okay? He's a very fantastic athlete that has a lot of flaws in his game, but if developed properly by the Bears coaching staff, maybe he could turn into something down the road. He's 6'4", weighs 260 pounds. His testing was pretty good, okay? One of the better athletes in this year's class, which is why I even selected him, guys. Okay, I think the athletic potential here is really, really strong, and it's worth, taking a 6th-round flyer on this guy. If you look at his production in college, he was pretty productive as well for the most part. Obviously, Coastal Carolina Sun Belt Conference is not a very strong conference. You're not going up against some of the better competition in college football, but still, he was fairly productive. So if you look at his total stats, he had 38.5 tackles for loss during 4 years there, had 17 sacks, 1 interception, 4 passes defended, 9 forced fumbles, which is pretty nice. And obviously he's not the biggest guy, not the strongest guy in the world, but he was productive in college and he tested pretty well as well. Okay, he's pretty fast, so hopefully we can turn that raw athleticism into something more with the Chicago Bears. So there you have it. That is my 2022 Bears mock draft. I'll put a picture of the draft on the screen right now so you guys can see all my picks again. And as you can see, I think I filled in our receiver hole pretty well. Got 2 pretty talented receivers. I filled in some holes on the offensive line too. I got 1 raw prospect with a lot of potential in Tyler Smith and 1 more refined prospect that can probably plug and play right away in Dylan Parham. I got some help on the defense too at the end of our draft in Tariq Castro Field, Smoke Monday, Jeffrey Gunter as well. Now, I know that some people may think that I didn't address the defensive needs as well in this draft, which, yes, you're probably right, okay? I only took 3 defensive players with their last remaining picks, but guys, if you want to build this offense up into what it needs to be, you're going to have to invest high round picks into the offense, okay? There's no way around it. Obviously, yes, you can find steals later on, but right now our offense isn't as good as it needs to be, and I would be okay with sacrificing a little bit on the defense to make sure that Justin Fields has the proper pieces around him to succeed. So let me know what you guys think about this mock in the comments down below. What would you change? What would you do differently? Who are your favorite prospects? Let me know down below. I cannot wait for the real draft to start. Gonna be under 2 weeks now, and it's going to be a lot of fun, man. Ryan Poles, his first picks as the general manager of the Bears. It's going to be interesting to see what he has up his sleeve. But leave your comments down below, guys. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. And as always, bear down.